Hello, we are the Salon Sleuths. My name is Melissa,
And my name is Leslie.
and we are two women from the Pacific Northwest.
We are both curious about the paranormal,
Spirit guides,
ghosts,
past lives,
and we are suspicious about
true crime,
disappearances.
strange phenomenons.
We are open to learning about the supernatural and all things we don't understand.
Together, we are opinionated with a splash of smartass.
Find Salon Sleuths on all major podcast platforms.
Well, hello, Salon Sleuth fans. Leslie, how are you today?
Melissa, I'm doing really well.
So
Yeah.
last week I wasn't here, as the listeners know, if they listen to the Suzanne Jocka show, because, got my new RV, and Eric and I decided to take a trip to the Yosemite because I'd never been there.
Which is one of my favorite places in the whole world.
Yes, which last appointment I had with Leslie, she was telling me that she and her husband wanted to get married there. You've went several times, you love Yosemite. And so I was like,
go every summer, and up until when Tristan was born, we took him as an infant, and then we kind of stopped going.
So did you camp in the park?
Well, we stayed in the cabins, which was Cary Village, which I think is
it's still called Cary Village.
Is it? Because when we went there a few years ago, they had changed it. They changed all the names to all the things. Like the Majestic used to be the Awani. What is it now?
It's still referred to as both. That's the weird part.
Yeah. So in Cary Village, they have all those little cabins. We stayed there. The last time we went, I actually stayed in the tent cabins, and I just took the kids. Michael didn't come.
Okay.
I stayed in those. But when the summer before that, I went with Michael. We stayed in housekeeping.
Yes.
Which is 3 walls, cement bricks with a shower curtain, basically. And those were great. I was kind of scared about the animals and stuff. And the only thing that had happened is Lucy had a little chocolate in one of her pockets, and the squirrels found it, dug a hole through her jacket and was able to get it. And
wow.
It was kind of fun.
So gosh, it was gorgeous, but we took a long weekend, and it was our first big trip in the RV. And, so at our last appointment, I'm telling her that she's telling me all this. And then she's telling me about these murders that happened at Yosemite.
Yes.
And so I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So that would be really timely to tell that story along with our trip. We had a fabulous time. She's referring to the traffic, which I posted on my Facebook page, but we stayed outside of Yosemite at a, it's called Camp Diem. It's a app that you can go on, and people rent out their land for you to camp on. So we actually camped outside the park, which sorry, I normally have that on silent, but because you and I was waiting for your text, I took it off of silent. So anyways, we camped at somebody's property, probably an hour outside of, it was gosh, what was the name of that little city? Don't even remember.
Mariposa?
No.
Okay. That's the only one I know about, right outside. Which is it right outside? Nothing's right outside.
Clover. So anyways, I don't remember.
A good movie, I think.
Yeah. Anyways, great little place. We had it all to ourselves. It was awesome. Loved it. But next time I would stay in the park. Here's what happened to us. Every day we would go to the park, and it was great because we had planned some hikes that weren't like the major hikes that everybody takes. I really wanted to do Mist Trail, which I didn't get to do because there was too many people, and the park ranger said we were going to do it at 2 or 2:30. And she's like, no, that's too late. It's going to get dark in the park. Well, it takes 3 hours. I think we would have been fine, but whatever. We didn't take it that day. And then the next day is when we got stuck.
And this is spring break?
This was California's spring break, which we didn't know. We arrived on a
spring break. There was nobody there, but it was raining and okay.
Anyway, it was gorgeous, 70s, so hot. We brought all these warm clothes because the weather had said it was going to be freezing. We brought all these lined clothes, and I wore the same pair of pants every day. And I had one tank top that I wore, and I washed the tank top, wore it again, and bought a shirt at the market because it was so warm. I was not prepared for that warm of clothes. So, but it was fine. Had a great time. It was beautiful. The views are amazing. But long story short, we didn't stay there in the park, and it took us, it didn't take us 3.5 hours. we ended up pulling over and dumping at the RV station before we went back to our campsite. And traffic was literally moving one car every 15 minutes to get out because we were at the back of the park. Because it's kind of a crazy eight. It's horrible traffic planning. It's like a crazy eight, one way to get in, one way to get out.
Yeah.
And we ended up waiting 3.5 hours pulled over in the dump station to have traffic finally moving. And even at that, it still took us a half hour to get out of the park because there was still lots of traffic. But it was beautiful with the RV because we took walks, we made dinner. The park ranger tried to kick us out, and I said, you know what, we're not going anywhere. And all these other people was pulling up while we were there, and she had no recourse. It was crazy traffic and whatever, but she tried to say that it was like that every day in the summer, and maybe it is, but they need to figure that out, because if there was like,
It's terrible.
if there was a mass casualty there,
Yeah.
it would be
Well,
horrible.
like when people fall off the mountain and they just the helicopter comes into that big field, like
Yeah.
right underneath El Capitan. Did you
Yes.
get to see that
Yes.
side this year? Did you look at night when you could see all the lights up above?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the night we got
And
stuck
I
because
was
we
just
didn't
trying
get to
to
leave
find
till.
a picture of Michael and I when we climbed Half Dome. I'll have to find
Did
it.
you climb it on like belay ropes and stuff?
Well, there's did you go up that far at
We
all?
did not, because it
Well,
was so
because
crazy.
it's a lottery to actually get up there. I think you get to the
Yes.
base of it and then you have to have the lottery to get up.
Yeah.
But there's they have like, I don't know if they're like 2x4s, like every 6 feet, and then ropes on each side. And at the
Oh,
bottom of it is like a pile of like gardening gloves, so that the ropes are metal, and the
yes.
wind rips around there. So like you kind of want to hold on,
Yeah.
and the rock's slippery. So then you hold on and then you try to get to the next 2x4.
Oh my
It's it
gosh.
was scary, but it wasn't super
Okay.
terrible. But I mean, there were little kids up there too. But
Oh.
I have a picture of us, and I'm wearing the gardening gloves that I found at the bottom, and it's just us up there. And
How long does it take to climb that?
well, when I left with Michael's mom, we left because we're slower than the boys. So we
Okay.
left in the dark and we came
Okay.
back in the dark. And you have to wear like bells on your shoes. And the only wild animals that we saw a baby deer, and I don't know what those are called. Is there a name for those?
Fawn?
Maybe. And but
Fawn.
it sounded like a kitten. It was like kind of
Oh.
meowing, and it was like kind of jumping, and we just figured mom's around here somewhere.
Yeah.
And then but I was worried about like more like cougars and bears. But and
Yeah.
as you're going, you remember like all the different crevices and stuff. You're like,
Yeah.
hey, a bear could be living in there, like. And I'm constantly looking around because you're just like in the middle.
Yeah.
And as you're like going up to Half Dome, there's a huge field, and I don't even remember what they call it, where people camp, and then
Yeah.
they have to pull their food up so the bears don't get
Bears don't
it.
get it.
And
Oh my gosh.
so I'm like, I know they're around here somewhere. They probably saw us way before we ever saw.
Oh yeah.
They've been maybe watching us even, but I never really saw anything. But I was scared coming back in the dark because I know the bears come down, or they used to come down at night to the camps to like get through the garbage and the
So
field.
it was a whole full day.
Oh yeah.
Oh
And I could
wow.
barely walk the next day. And the thing was, like, Michael's mom at the time, like, I was really young, so
Yeah.
I had a lot more energy and I was in better shape. And so I would go up and then I'd wait for her. So I'd get sweaty and then I'd freeze because I was waiting for her.
Oh yeah.
And then so it was like that the whole time. And then the boys finally caught up. And then I think we might have left even before them. I can't remember, um but it was like, I mean, I like my like the best thing Michael did is make me get on a bike the next day
Oh
to
yeah.
like
Get
get
the
my legs
lactic
going. And
acid.
then after that it was fine. But like you couldn't even touch me. Like, don't touch me. I can't.
Uh,
It hurts so bad. And you have to carry your water. Like, yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is gorgeous. It is
It's
beautiful.
such a pretty place.
So, the murders that you told me
Yeah.
about,
We should talk about that another time when we have lots of time.
the
Because that's
murders.
key. Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you want me to tell you now? And we
Okay.
can even break this into two parts.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. Okay. So, the murders at Yosemite, which kind of freaked me out. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't listen to this before, because um, the areas around Yosemite are pretty um, poor, right? They're not wealthy communities. They're
These are
pretty
just little
remote.
towns. These
They're
are like,
just, yeah,
yeah.
little towns. And so this happened in 1999, just outside of Yosemite at the Cedar Lodge Motel in El Portal, California, which is on Highway 40. And it's pretty much like all those little towns around there. You don't really know when you're coming in and out of one. There's like two basically that you kind of know you're going in and out of. But so two women and two teenagers were killed. The first group was 42-year-old Carol Sund and her 15-year-old daughter, Julie Sund, and Julie's friend, an Argentine exchange student named Silvina Pelosa. And they had decided to go on a college trip. And along the way, visiting colleges, they were going to go to Yosemite. Um, so that's the first three that died. The fourth one was a Yosemite Institute employee named Joey Ruth Armstrong. She was 26 years old. And when the first killings happened, Carol, Julie, and Sylvania, were staying at the Cedar Lodge while on their trip. And here enters boom, 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 the bad guy. Maintenance worker Cary Stayner in February of 1999, the day after Valentine's Day, he decides that he's going to kill his girlfriend and two daughters. But when he got there to their house, they lived above a bar. She was a waitress at the bar. They lived above it. When he got there, he got spooked because he saw another man on the grounds where they lived. And so he left there. And he went back to the Cedar Lodge where he worked as a maintenance guy. And he turned his attention to this red car. There was only one red car in the parking lot, or one car, I'm sorry, in the parking lot. And he noticed that the curtains were open in their room and he could see in, and there was just one mom and two young girls. And he had made his mark. So he decides that he's going in because they don't have a man. So he knocks on the door and, announces that he's maintenance and told Carol that there was a leak in the room upstairs from them. And we don't really know exactly what happened, although he was very forthcoming about, confessing. But he proceeded to strangle the mother, and then he sexually assaulted the two girls, and then he kills them. Yes. Later, Carol and exchange student Pelosa his body were found in the burned out rental car, the red car that they'd brought after they were reported missing. And Julie, the daughter, wasn't found until a month later when Cary Stayner anonymously sent a map to tell authorities where they could find her body with a note that said, "We had fun with this one." And in investigating this, the authorities spoke with all the Cedar Lodge employees, including Cary Stayner, and he, in fact, let them into all the rooms to examine the rooms with the FBI. And the whole time they were unaware that he was their killer. In fact, when he interviewed them, he didn't set off any alarm bells at all. He even divulged his personal story and childhood, which I will tell you about because that comes to play, I think, pretty significantly in his life and is also horrific. So he tells them that whole story. But they eventually arrested two other brothers and accused them of the crimes, but they didn't commit them. In the summer of that same year, so this happened in February, in the summer of that same year, Joey Armstrong, the 26-year-old woman running the educational programs for Yosemite children, was reported missing and found decapitated in the park. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh. And it turns out after Cary confessed that she had been packing her car for a trip when he saw her. And he claims to have just been throwing rocks into the river in the park. And he held her up by gunpoint, duct taped her, and forced her into his car. And he says that as he was driving, she fell through the window and started running. Cary caught up to her and slit her throat. And by this time, Cary had left too much evidence at this scene. he knew he was in trouble. He'd left his red mechanic's hat, he'd left sunglasses and tire tracks. And there was also a witness that had seen his car on the road where Armstrong lived. So eventually, authorities went out looking for Cary and found him at a nudist colony 2 hours north of Yosemite. Did you know that? Did you know there was
I
a
did not know that part.
He actually, when he was found by authorities, he quickly confessed to all of the murders, including the other three. And they really didn't know that he had done it. They weren't even looking at him for that. But he also then confessed to having wanted to kill his girlfriend and her two kids. And that was it was his initial plan. Um, they also learned at this time that he always carried a murder kit, which was his backpack. It had a gun, duct tape, and knife inside of it. And the girls of the girlfriend of his at this time says, "Oh yeah, he was always carrying that backpack." And they, of course, had no idea. They actually really liked him. He was very kind to them, very sweet, gave them beanie babies all the time, which, he was kind of prepping them. But he was eventually convicted in both state and federal courts. He was sentenced to death in 2002, but still remains on death row today. So
I told you.
horrific,
Yeah.
horrific. Like, to think a maintenance guy is going to come and kill you is just
Well, and in a
beyond.
park when you're like, it is so out there, right?
Yes.
And it's so dense woods. You could kind of like hide anybody anytime.
Oh yeah.
And she just went there with the two girls for a vacation. I took
Yeah.
my four kids, like,
Yes.
and we stayed
Yeah.
in the park. We stayed in the thick of the park though. We didn't stay like on some little inn. But
Yes.
like I thought he was coming in to do something in the bathroom, but you said it was the leak.
He said there was a leak above, which
Yeah.
there wasn't, but that was what he used to come in. And I guess I've been in hotels before where maintenance, usually I call maintenance. I don't think I've let maintenance in, but they've got a shirt on, they've got a
Yeah.
hat on, like they
Well,
look
he
like,
could have had all of that, and he probably looked
yeah,
legit. Like
he was legit. Like he
yeah.
was legit the maintenance man, but
To think what he did to them until they found the one body. Where did they find the other two? Because one of them was in the car, and the car was kind of buried because I saw some of
two
the pictures.
t-
Oh,
two,
toward
the
car.
mom and the exchange student were burned beyond recognition. They only could figure it out with dental records, but it was the rental car that they had rented. So obviously when he confessed, they knew it was them, but they were
And her daughter was somewhere else.
it was her daughter, and he had sent
Oh,
a map
yeah. Okay.
to authorities. But this is the part also that is so sad and telling, that what led him to this, right? We don't always get to know how did this person become this person. Well, this is shocking, and I don't know if you know this part. So he was born in August 13th, 1971, in Merced, California, which is again right out there in that same area. When he was 11, his brother, Stephen Stayner, who is 7, was kidnapped by child molester Kenneth Parnell in 1972. So this is significant because he later goes on to say that he felt like he should have been with his brother at that time. And his brother goes, what?
If he was, what year was that? Because he was 1 when his brother went missing.
No, he was 11.
Oh, 11.
He was 11. His brother was 7.
Okay.
And this was 1972. Stephen, his brother, was held captive for 7 years until he escaped. And Cary felt neglected by his parents after Stephen disappeared, and even said that he thought that he should have been there with his brother the day that it happened. When Stephen actually returned, that was also a big deal, because what happened was Parnell, the child molester and kidnapper, actually tried to get another boy, and he ended up getting a 5-year-old. And Stephen was like, no way am I going to let this happen.
I know this story. I did not know that they related to the guy in Yosemite.
Yes.
So he
Yes,
didn't want the same thing to happen to this little boy,
he
so
didn't.
he frees both of them.
He didn't. So
So I did
he
not know those two were related.
yes, this was made into a crime book. It was
Yeah,
made
I
into a
had no idea,
TV
but I know
movie.
both of those stories.
Yes, he put the little boy on his back, and while Parnell was actually at work, he put the boy on his back and ran for their lives. And he came back home, and he there was all this media attention. He was, revered as a hero. He'd saved this boy, he'd saved himself. And there was tons of media. They end up making a book, a TV movie, and the TV movie is I Know My First Name is Steven. And that all rings bells to me. But 9 years later, so basically Cary, his brother, does not deal well with all this attention around his brother either. And I think he's got survivor's guilt, and he's got a lot of issues surrounded with Stephen's disappearance too. And only 9 years later, so in 1989, Stephen would die in a motorcycle accident. Did you know that part?
I didn't.
I didn't know that part either. And then the following year, 1990, Carrie's uncle Jess, whom he was living with at the time, was murdered. So, and then Cary also says that he claimed his uncle molested him while his brother was abducted as well. Now, I don't know if that's the same Uncle Jess that died, or that's a different uncle. I'm assuming it's a different uncle, because I don't think you'd be all, living with the guy and all bent out that, he was murdered if so, but that I couldn't find that information. And Cary also admitted to trying to commit suicide in 1991. He was arrested in 1997 for possession of marijuana and meth. And these charges were eventually dropped. But clearly, he just really struggled after his brother disappeared and then even came back. He just never got the mental help. During his trial for these murders, he pleaded guilty by reason of insanity, and his lawyers claimed that he was sexually abused, that he had mental illness, that he had OCD, mild autism, and parophilia, which means abnormal sexual fantasies, which I would say probably all of those things are true of him. I don't know that that makes him insane. He definitely knew what he was doing because he planned it. It wasn't like he just got into a fit of rage and didn't know. So yeah, that was the story. And I didn't know those two were tied either, but I'd heard of the other story, but didn't know that about the Yosemite story. So yeah, that's the whole thing. Isn't
I
that
didn't think
crazy?
that they were related. That's really crazy. And the part of me that, like, I get when people are insane, are they saying that they don't know their actions? Because anybody, I don't feel like you can murder somebody and be sane.
Yeah.
Like, I might
Yeah.
be insane and still know what I'm doing, right? Like,
Right.
or is that not what they are considering insane?
I think that the insanity plea has to be that
They
they
don't
don't
know.
understand the difference between right and wrong. And he clearly did. Um,
Or is it just that you have this drive and you can't control yourself? To me, could be your,
no, I don't think
but
that's
I
it.
don't think
I
they
mean,
consider that. Like,
I don't think
you
it's
still know
the
right from wrong.
legal. Yeah, I don't think it's a
I still
legal
know it's wrong
definition.
to murder somebody. I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, that's the Yosemite murder story, which I'm glad I didn't know that, because I was like, you know, in the middle of nowhere in an RV
Well,
near the Cedar Lodge.
camping freaks me out because I mean, I could go in and tell you a bunch of other stories of people who have been murdered in their tents.
Yeah,
Like,
don't tell
you
me.
just don't know if the
Yes,
people next to you are totally insane, or
I
are they a
know.
stainer, or are they a whatever.
Yeah, or they're going to have mental illness that all of a sudden they snap and they think you're,
Yeah,
a bear or a zombie, God
anything.
forbid.
Anyway,
Yeah, so that's my story about Yosemite. And
ugh.
ah
But I do have to say, every time like I cook chicken in a skillet, I think of Jeffrey Dahmer.
really? Did he cook
Oh,
people in a skillet?
he cooked and ate them. So,
Oh,
which
gross.
then also reminds me of Hannibal Lecter. He
Yes,
was
that's
like cooking that
disgusting.
guy's brain, and then I'm like, so then I'm like, I don't really want to eat meat anymore. But
You
I
know,
honestly think that we probably taste more like pig. Pork, don't you? We're
no,
probably really
I've never
salty
thought
and
of
fatty.
this.
We're
I have
probably not like chicken.
never thought of what we tasted like as humans.
I mean,
I never thought of that, Leslie.
I think I'm probably really fatty and salty.
I think I would need a lot of teriyaki sauce
There's no way I would
on
ever eat a
humans.
person. Like I
No.
always joked, did you ever see the movie Alive where they're in the airplane and
Yes.
crash?
Yes.
I'm like, they would be able to eat for like weeks off of my body. Like, go right ahead, eat it all. Like
Oh,
that's
gross.
gross.
Disgusting. Oh my gosh.